Welcome to Kieu Dung channel. If this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to support me in creating more meaningful videos.
Today, we continue following the difficult journey of Sung Luyen. After spending a long, cold night curled up inside an abandoned house by the roadside, a place that barely protected her from the rain and wind, she's forced to stand up and move on once again. There is no other choice. She needs to find another shelter, a place where she might be able to stay longer, a place she can call home, even if only for a short chapter of her life. The sky is heavy and dark. Without warning, a sudden rainstorm pours down, mixing with the biting cold that seeps deep into her skin. On the empty road, there is no one else in sight. Sung Luyen walks alone, silently, her footsteps echoing in the rain. Her small figure fades into the gray curtain of water, making her look even more fragile and lonely. Every step feels heavier than the last, not only because of the thick mud beneath her feet, but because of the exhaustion and fear weighing on her heart. She does not know where she will sleep tonight. She does not know how much longer she can keep going. Yet she continues forward, driven by nothing but the instinct to survive. After walking for quite some time through the blurred rain and cold air, a faint shape appears in the distance. An abandoned house. Its roof is worn and broken, its walls covered in moss and stains from years of neglect. It stands alone in the cold, silent landscape, forgotten by time. Sung Luyen slows her steps. She hesitates only for a moment. Without overthinking, she moves closer. In her tired eyes, that broken house is not just a ruin. It is a small, fragile hope quietly flickering in the middle of the storm. She steps slowly into the yard of the abandoned house. Tall weeds surround the entrance, vines crawling over broken fences and cracked stone paths. Nature has taken over this place completely. One glance is enough to tell that no one has lived here for many years. The silence feels heavy, as if time itself has stopped. Sung Luyen pauses for a moment, listening. There is only the sound of rain falling on leaves, the wind brushing through wild grass, and her own breathing. Every step she takes feels cautious, almost fearful. She does not know what she might find inside, but turning back is not an option. She walks deeper into the property, pushing aside thick vines with her hands. Her clothes quickly become wet and muddy. The ground beneath her feet is uneven, softened by years of rain and neglect. Still, she keeps moving forward. The first place she checks is the bathroom. The door hangs loosely on its hinges. Inside, the walls are cracked and darkened with mold. The roof has partially collapsed, allowing rainwater to pour straight down. Grass and weeds grow tall where tiles once were. There is no sign that this space could ever be used again. It is cold, broken, and lifeless. She steps back out and moves toward what once used to be the kitchen. The sight is no better. The structure has fallen apart almost completely. Rusted metal, broken wood, and collapsed beams lie scattered on the ground. Where a cooking area once stood, only wild plants remain, growing high and uncontested. The smell of damp earth fills the air. Sung Luyen lowers her head. She already knows this house will not be easy to stay in, but even in its broken state, it offers something she desperately needs: walls, a roof, and a small chance to rest. She finally approaches the main entrance and steps inside the house itself. The interior is dark, even during the daytime. Dust and debris cover the floor. Broken furniture lie everywhere. Chairs without legs, tables split in half, shelves collapsed under their own weight. Nothing here has been touched in years. Vines creep through broken windows and cracks in the walls, spreading across the floor like veins. Leaves and dirt have piled up in every corner. It feels as if the forest outside has slowly swallowed the house from within. She carefully walks across the room, making sure the floor will not give way beneath her. Every step sends echoes through the empty space. Her eyes move slowly from one corner to another, assessing the damage, measuring what can still be used and what must be removed. This is not just a house in ruins. It is a place forgotten by the world. Song Luyen sets her bag down gently. She does not sit yet. First, she needs to understand where she is. She walks through each room, one by one. The bedroom is barely recognizable. The bed frame is broken, covered in dust and spider webs. The window has no glass, allowing cold air and rain to enter freely. She stands there quietly for a long moment. There is disappointment, but no surprise. She has seen worse. What matters now is not comfort. What matters is survival. She looks around again, more carefully this time. Despite the damage, the structure is still standing. Some walls remain strong. The roof, though leaking, has not completely collapsed. With effort, this place might become livable, at least for a while. Her face shows exhaustion, but also determination. She has learned that hope does not always come in beautiful forms. Sometimes, hope looks like a broken house filled with weeds and trash. Rain continues to fall outside, tapping against the roof and walls. The cold slowly creeps deeper into the rooms. Song Luyen wraps her arms around herself, trying to preserve warmth. Staying outside is no longer possible. She takes a deep breath. This place is far from safe. It is far from clean, but for now, it is shelter. Standing alone in the ruined house, surrounded by debris and silence, Song Luyen makes a quiet decision. If she wants to survive, she must start here. She must clean, repair, and reclaim this forgotten space with her own hands. The house may be abandoned, but she is not ready to give up. And in this moment, among the weeds, broken walls, and cold rain, a new chapter of her journey begins. She walks back toward the center of the house once more, taking everything in with tired eyes. The smell of damp wood and decay lingers in the air. Her shoes sink slightly into the soft, dirty floor. Every corner tells the same story: neglect, abandonment, silence. For a moment, she closes her eyes. This is not the life she dreamed of, but this is the reality she must face. Slowly, she exhales and opens her eyes again. There is no anger, no tears, only quiet acceptance. If this place is all she has, then this place will have to be enough. And so, standing alone inside the ruins, Song Luyen prepares herself for what comes next. Song Luyen lowered her few belongings to the floor, placing them near the base of the peeling wall with a gentleness that seemed out of place in such a violent ruin. The sound of the fabric bag touching the concrete was small, almost fragile, a soft thud that should have been swallowed instantly by the vastness of the space. Instead, in the suffocating silence of the abandoned house, it rang out like a gavel striking a judge's desk. It was a sound of finality, a sound that declared she had stopped moving. She stood perfectly still for a long moment, her chest rising and falling in a shallow rhythm, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. She looked around, not with the curiosity of a visitor, but with the wary calculation of a survivor trying to understand the beast she had just walked into the belly of. She needed to understand where she was, and more importantly, what she had just chosen to face. This place was broken. It was not merely old, it was shattered. The house felt less like a structure and more like a carcass that had been picked clean by time and scavengers. The air inside was stagnant, heavy with the metallic tang of rust and the sour, cloying scent of wet rot. It was cold, a damp, bone-seeping chill that radiated from the concrete walls, a cold that seemed to have nothing to do with the weather outside and everything to do with the absence of life inside. It was the temperature of a tomb. It was dirty, coated in layers of grime accumulated over seasons of neglect, a filth that felt ancient and ossified, and it was forgotten. That was the most overwhelming sensation of all. The house felt as though it had been erased from the memory of the world. No one looked at this place. No one remembered who lived here. It was a ghost standing in plain sight. But as Sung Luan looked at the rain streak against the darkened window, she knew the terrifying truth. This was the only shelter she had. There was no backup plan, no warm door waiting to open elsewhere. This ruin was the line drawn between her and the abyss. She took a deep breath, inhaling the dust and the dampness, holding it in her lungs as if to acclimatize her body to this new reality. Slowly, methodically, she began to roll up her sleeves. First the left, folding the fabric neatly over her forearm, then the right. There was no hesitation in her movements, no trembling in her fingers. There was only a quiet, stoic acceptance. She knew the equation of survival by heart. If she wanted to stay here even for one single night, the house had to be cleaned. There is no comfort without effort. There is no rest without work. She began with the vines. To call them plants would be to underestimate them. They were invaders. They were everywhere, a chaotic green nervous system that had paralyzed the house. Long, thick creepers crawled across the floor in serpentine patterns, twisting around the legs of broken furniture, choking the life out of the wood. They climbed the walls like living creatures, their tendrils seeking out every crack and crevice, prying the masonry apart with slow, botanical violence. Some of the vines had died years ago, dried out and cracked, hanging like brittle gray ropes. Others were disturbingly alive, a deep, dark green, stubbornly feeding on the moisture dripping from the leaking roof and the darkness that pooled in the corners. They had claimed this house for years, spreading freely, growing fat on neglect. They were the current masters of this domain, and Sung Luan was the intruder. She walked to the far wall, where a massive vine, thick as a man's wrist, had wrapped itself around a window frame. She grabbed it with both hands. The bark was rough, biting into her palms. She pulled. It did not come easily. It didn't move at all. The vine felt anchored to the very foundation of the earth, resisting her with rigid stubbornness. Sung Luan tightened her grip, her knuckles turning white. She planted her feet firmly on the slick floor, gritted her teeth, and pulled harder, engaging the muscles of her back and shoulders. The vine groaned, a dry, wooden sound of protest, stretching taut. It clung to the cracks in the floor as if it were holding on for its life, as if it knew that letting go meant death. With a sharp, guttural exhale, she gave a violent tug. The vine snapped free from the wall with the sound of a cracking whip. A cloud of ancient dust exploded into the air, blinding her momentarily. Sung Luan turned her face away, coughing as the grit filled her mouth and nose, but she did not let go. She coiled the severed length of the plant and threw it toward the center of the room. One vine became two, two became many. She moved through the room with a trance-like focus. Bend down, grip, pull, tear, stand up, throw. It was a brutal rhythm. Her fingers scraped against the rough plaster of the walls and the splintered wood of the floor. Dirt, black and oily, filled the fine lines of her hands and packed itself under her nicknails. The work was exhausting, repetitive, and physically painful, but she did not stop. She couldn't stop. If she stopped, the sheer magnitude of the task would crush her spirit. As the vines fell away, stripping the walls of their green masks, the floor beneath them began to appear. It was stained, cracked, and uneven, but it was real. It was architecture, not nature. Each cleared section, each square foot of exposed concrete felt like reclaiming a small piece of control over her life.
She was drawing a boundary. Nature ends here. My home begins here.
She moved into the next room and continued the assault. More vines, more resistance, more effort. Her arms began to ache, a dull throb that started in her wrists and radiated up to her neck. Her breathing grew heavier, the air rasping in her throat. Sweat broke out on her forehead, mixing with the frigid air to create a clammy layer on her skin that made her shiver. Outside, the rain intensified, tapping a relentless, drumming rhythm against the metal roof, a constant auditory reminder of the harsh, wet world waiting just inches beyond these walls. But inside, she kept working. As the vines were stripped away, the true condition of the house was revealed in all its tragic detail. It was a graveyard of objects. Broken furniture lay scattered everywhere, the skeletal remains of a former life. Chairs without legs lay on their sides like fallen soldiers. Tables were split in half, their surfaces warped by humidity. Shelves had collapsed under years of gravity and rot, spilling their contents onto the floor. Shards of glass glittered faintly in the gloom, sharp and dangerous. Old plastic containers, torn fabric that might once have been curtains, rusted metal tins, everything was piled together in a chaotic disorder that defied logic. For a moment, Sung Luoyan stood in the center of the room, her hands hanging by her sides, and the sight felt overwhelming. There was so much to clean, so much damage. It wasn't just the physical mess, it was the weight of the time it represented. Years of decay stared back at her, and she was completely alone. There was no one to hold a flashlight, no one to carry the heavy end of a beam, no one to tell her, "Good job." She closed her eyes for a second, fighting back the urge to walk out into the rain and disappear. Then she knelt. She began gathering the trash. She worked carefully, sorting as she went, her mind engaging in a triage of survival. What can be moved? What must be thrown away? What might still be useful in a week? She did not rush. Every movement was deliberate. Every action had a purpose. In a world where she had nothing, waste was a sin. Dust rose with every shift of the debris, coating her face in a gray mask, matting her hair and settling into the weave of her clothes. She coughed again, her throat raw and dry, but she swallowed the complaint. Complaining changes nothing. The debris doesn't care about your comfort. She reminded herself of the rule: if this place is ever going to become livable, it must first be cleared. Piece by piece, she dragged the broken items toward the far side of the room, creating a pile of the condemned. Some items were too damaged to save: a chair that dissolved into powder when she touched it, a mattress that was little more than a nest for rats. She paused briefly before discarding them, a flicker of sadness in her eyes, then let them go. Survival teaches hard lessons. You cannot carry everything with you. Sometimes you must leave the past behind to survive the present. The floor beneath the debris was worse than she had expected. Thick layers of dried mud covered large sections of the room, caked on like a hardened scab. The house had been flooded before, maybe many times. When the river or the rains had rushed in years ago, they brought with them the silt of the earth, the waste of the forest, and the decay of the soil. When the water receded, it left this hardened, suffocating mess behind. Sung Luoyan stared at the floor in silence. It looked impenetrable. Then she knelt again. She didn't have a shovel, she didn't have a scraper. She began scraping the mud away using whatever tools she could scavenge from the rubble. A shard of broken wood with a sharp edge, a piece of rusted sheet metal, and sometimes, when the mud was soft enough, just her bare hands. The mud was stubborn. It clung tightly to the floor as if it had fused with the concrete. Her fingers quickly grew sore, the skin raw and red. Dirt jammed itself under her nails until they throbbed. Her back started to scream, a sharp, hot line of pain running down her spine from bending over for so long. She straightened up briefly, stretching her shoulders until they popped, wincing, and then immediately bent back down. Scrape, pull, clear. Scrape, pull, clear. Time lost its meaning. There was no clock here, no schedule, no appointment to keep, except the appointment with survival. The cold air seeped into her body, numbing her skin, making her movements clumsy. Her hands trembled slightly from fatigue and low blood sugar, but she kept working, because stopping meant giving up. Stopping meant admitting that the mud was stronger than she was. As she cleared more of the floor, small patches of the original surface began to appear. It was cracked tile, worn smooth by footsteps that had long since ceased to walk here. It was imperfect, but it was solid. It was a surface that could be swept. It was a surface that could be cleaned. It was a surface that a human being could live on. That thought gave her a surge of strength. She wasn't just cleaning dirt, she was restoring dignity. As she swept, memories drifted through her mind, unbidden. She remembered nights spent shivering in the open cold, huddled under plastic sheets. She remembered days filled with the gnawing ache of hunger and the paralyzing fear of uncertainty. She remembered moments when she wondered if she would survive another week, another day, another hour. Life had tested her in ways she had never imagined, stripping away her comfort, her security, her family. But she was still here, still moving, still fighting. She finished one room and moved to the next, then another. She refused to cut corners. She refused to leave any shadow untouched. Every cleared space felt like a small victory against a universe that had tried to erase her existence. Eventually, she turned her attention to the doorway. Tall weeds and wild grass had grown unchecked outside, creeping inward, rising like a green tide to block the entrance. They obscured the light, making the house feel like a cave. She stepped outside into the cold air. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but the wind was biting. She gripped the thick stalks of the weeds. Cut, pull, clear. Her arms burned with a fiery lactic acid buildup. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts of white mist. Rainwater dripped from her hair onto her face, mixing with the salt of her sweat. Yet with every patch she cleared, more gray daylight entered the house. The doorway became visible again. It was no longer a hole in the wall. It was an entrance, a threshold. She paused, leaning forward, hands on her knees, catching her breath. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. This work was more than physical. It was emotional alchemy. Each weed she cut felt like resistance against a life that had tried to trap her. She did not speak. She did not scream at the sky, but her actions carried the weight of a manifesto. I will not be overgrown. I will not be buried. She returned inside and looked around. The house was still far from perfect. The walls were cracked maps of neglect. The roof still leaked, dripping water into puddles in the corner. The cold remained, damp and relentless, but the chaos had been reduced. The visual noise of the debris was gone. Order was beginning to take shape in the void. She walked toward the old bed. It stood against the far wall, fragile and neglected. It was an iron frame, rusted and creaking under the slightest touch. Dust and debris covered it completely, a shroud of gray fluff. There was no mattress, no blanket, no pillow, no comfort. Still, she did not turn away in disgust. She found a rag, a piece of torn fabric she had salvaged, and began to wipe the frame. She worked slowly, removing layers of dirt and grime, brushing away the skeletons of insects and the webs of spiders. The metal beneath was cold and rough, pitted with age, but as she wiped, it became clean. Tonight, this was where she would sleep. It wasn't soft, but it was off the ground. It was a place designed for rest, reclaiming its purpose.
When the work is finally done, Sung Luyen sits down slowly, her body heavy with exhaustion. Every muscle aches. Her hands tremble slightly as the cold begins to creep deeper into her bones. The silence around her feels thick, almost overwhelming. She does not move for a long moment. Breathing in, breathing out. The house is still far from comfortable, but it is quiet now. The chaos has been reduced. The floor is clean enough to walk on. The air feels calmer, as if the house itself is resting with her. Sung Luyen slowly rises and walks toward the bed. There is no mattress, no blanket, no warmth, only the bare wooden frame she cleaned earlier. She climbs onto it carefully, her movements slow and deliberate. The wood is cold against her skin. The chill travels instantly through her body, sending a sharp reminder of how fragile this shelter truly is. She curls up slightly, pulling her arms close to her chest, trying to preserve what little warmth she has. Outside, the cold presses against the walls. The night air seeps through cracks in the roof and broken windows, making the room feel even colder. Her breath becomes visible in the dim light. This is not sleep born of comfort. This is sleep born of exhaustion. Her eyes slowly close, not because she feels safe, but because her body can no longer stay awake. The day has taken everything she has. As she drifts into sleep, her thoughts fade into fragments, memories, worries, quiet hopes she no longer dares to name. The cold remains, sharp and unforgiving, but her tired body surrenders to rest. For a brief moment, the world grows silent. In this abandoned house, on a bare wooden bed, Sung Luyen sleeps, not dreaming of a better life, but simply grateful to survive another day. And in the freezing darkness of the night, that fragile rest becomes her only comfort.
Sung Luyen wakes slowly after a short, restless sleep. Her body is stiff from the cold. The wooden bed beneath her offers no warmth, no comfort. But the rest, however brief, has given her just enough strength to move again. Her stomach tightens with hunger. She sits up, rubs her arms, and looks around the quiet room. Morning light slips faintly through the broken windows. The house is still cold, still fragile, but for a moment, it feels familiar. She checks her belongings. There is very little left, and in her hand, only a small amount of money remains. It is not enough for much, but maybe enough for some food. Enough to quiet the hunger, at least for today. Sung Luyen stands, gathers her things, and walks toward the door. Her movements are calm, almost careful, as if she does not want to disturb the fragile peace she found here. She steps outside, and then she stops. In front of the house stands a woman wearing a raincoat. Rainwater drips from the edges of the hood. The woman's face is tense, serious, unfamiliar. She does not speak. Instead, she raises her hands and begins to gesture. Slowly, clearly. She points to the house, then to herself, then shakes her head firmly. Sung Luyen watches, confused at first, then understanding begins to sink in. The woman is mute. She cannot speak, but her message is unmistakable. This house belongs to her, and Sung Luyen is not allowed to stay. For a moment, time seems to pause. Sung Luyen stands there, silent, her hands tightening around her belongings. She wants to explain. She wants to ask for mercy, for just a little more time. But there are no words exchanged, only gestures, boundaries, and reality. The woman's expression does not change. There is no anger, but there is no compassion either, only firmness. Sung Luyen lowers her eyes. Disappointment washes over her slowly, deeply. This place, broken as it was, had become a small refuge, a place where she rested, a place where she worked with her own hands, a place where she hoped, even briefly, that she could stay. Now, that hope disappears. She nods quietly. There is no argument, no resistance. She turns back inside the house one last time. Carefully, she picks up her belongings. The bag feels heavier now, not because of its weight, but because of what it represents. Another goodbye, another ending without warning. She steps outside again. The rain continues to fall. Sung Luyen walks away from the house, her back slightly hunched, her steps slow. She does not look back. Looking back would only make it harder. She is alone once more. This is the reality of survival. Not every effort is rewarded.
Not every place you clean becomes a home. Not every struggle ends in rest. But still, she walks forward. Because life does not stop when hope is taken away. Life continues, demanding courage even when the heart is heavy. Sung Luyen disappears down the road, carrying everything she owns, searching once again for a place to exist. And in her journey, there is a lesson for all of us. Life is fragile, shelter is uncertain, and nothing is guaranteed. But as long as we keep moving, as long as we refuse to surrender, there is still meaning in every step. If this story touched you, if you believe in resilience, survival, and the quiet strength of the human spirit, please consider supporting this journey. Subscribe to the channel, stay with us, and continue walking alongside stories that remind us what it truly means to live.